This is my 67 GMC that I built on the cheap 10 years ago. I'm a Pontiac guy, so I like GMCs because they're both the non-Chevy version. I have a bunch of classic GMCs outside, but the 67 is my favorite. The reason I wanted a 67 specifically is because I have a 67 Firebird. It was my first car. I bought it when I was 15. I still have it. This goes along with it. I also like that the 67 has a small back window, no marker lights, no trim under the hood. And they both have, this and the Firebird both have 4 headlights and a split grille, so they kind of go together in my opinion. This was a 2-wheel drive long bed with a 6-cylinder in it. I pulled out of a guy's field in 2013 for $800. I later bought a 5-lug trailing arm long bed frame from a guy. He had already put drop spindles on it and a C-notch in the rear. And I had a LQ4 sitting in my shop. I bought a 4L80 off a marketplace for $100, and then I realized I had everything to put this together, so I was working on something else. This wasn't on the agenda, but I have a bad habit of collecting projects and parts. I don't like vehicles to not roll. I don't like having spare parts laying around, so when I realize I have everything to put something together, I'll at least take a few days to consolidate it, get it rolling, get rid of what I don't need. So I do jump around a lot on my projects. I'm trying not to buy anything new for that very reason. So I had everything, so I decided I'd spend a couple days building it. I shortened this long bed frame. I have shortened a lot of long beds. No long bed is safe at my house. I've done everything from a 49 GMC to an 06 GMC. So I cut the bed down. I like the patina on this truck. I do want to paint it eventually. I have a roll pan for it now that I need to try to paint match. I need to finish welding up the bed sides. Needs rockers and cab corners, so I'd like to do all that. Hopefully get some paint to match to where it's not going to be obvious, and then I'll touch up the seams so it doesn't look like a cut down short bed. If you're not familiar with these trucks, the short beds all have a sharp corner right there. In 67 the long bed had it too, but 68 to 72 it's rounded, and so that's one way you can tell a cut down short bed, unless they fixed that. But if it's rounded right there, you know it was a long bed that has been cut down. The LQ4 I originally put in this, I bought on eBay. It was the first one I ever bought. I was going to put it in my 2000 Silverado with a 5.3, but never got around to it. So I decided to use it on this. The 4L80 cost me $100. I have been parting out 6-liter trucks for quite a while now. Everything else I've got a 6-liter in was free from a part out. So I had accessories in an intake. I reworked a stock harness. I have HP tuners, so I turned off the VATs in the PCM. I did buy a swap radiator. I didn't even buy swap mounts. Those are stock truck mounts. I made plates to bolt to the frame to bolt that in. Those are headers off of a 98 Camaro that I parted out. This didn't have power steering. I put an S10 steering column in it with a Mustang rack. I had to extend the steering column. It has horrible bump steer, but I've driven it like this for a long time. At the time, I think options for an EFI fuel tank were limited. And I will sometimes just throw whatever spare stuff I have together to make it work. I have a little more money now and less time, so I don't like doing that anymore. I've been buying what I need to make something a little nicer the first go around, so I don't have to redo it. But originally, that 98 Camaro I parted out, those have a steel tank, so I cut the pump ring out and welded it in the truck tank behind the seat, and I ran fuel lines down through the floor to the engine. I ran it like that for 8 years. A few months ago, I put a Tanks Inc. tank in it because I put a 6.2 in it, and this has a returnless fuel rail, and that pump ring was leaking on the original tank, and I was like, well, if I'm going to run new fuel lines, I'm just going to get a new tank. I decided to do the 6.2 swap because, for one, I wanted more power, and I've also been parting out 07 Yukons to get the 6.2s. But I parked this one day a couple years ago, and then the next time I went to get in it, it wouldn't start. It cranked really fast like it had no compression. It had been making a rattling noise, so I assumed the timing chain broke. But here's the LQ4 that came out of it. The timing chain's not broke. I thought maybe the front of the cam broke off. That's okay. When I bought this engine on eBay, they said it had 15,000 miles, and they replaced it because it had a lifter noise. But what I have figured out about these is I think people are mistaking an exhaust tick for a lifter tick because they always have broken exhaust manifold bolts. So I extracted the broken bolts, put it in there with new bolts for the headers. It didn't make any noise at all. And I do believe it was only 15,000 miles because I probably put 2,000 on it. It's very clean inside. There's minimal wear on everything. When I put the 6.2 in, I didn't want to have to change my harness and PCM. So I pulled the crank. You can get the crank out with the heads on and the pistons in. I swapped the reluctor to a 24X reluctor, put a BTR stage 1 cam in it with a 1X timing set. And that is the same harness and PCM that I used before with adapters for the throttle body and the injectors. So now it's running a cammed 6.2 on a stock 6.0 tune, so I need to tune it, which is why I pulled it in today. So I'm just trying to get it back on the road. In the near future, I want to get some nicer wheels, put Restomod air in it. I may splurge a little and put a Tremec Magnum in it. In the future, I want to put this on a SpeedTech Extreme chassis. There's SpeedTech Firebird, or suspension under that Firebird. It'll get bare brakes and some 3-piece forged wheels, and I will probably use this same 6.2. I would have gone with a more aggressive cam if I had had a 6-speed in it already. I didn't want to have to buy a torque converter for this 4L80. So later on, new chassis, wheels, tires, brakes, this 6.2, a 6-speed, it'll have AC. I'll repaint the whole thing, smooth the firewall, make the engine bay nice. And for the interior, I really liked it. This is all steel. The door panels are steel. There's no headliner. I've already done the dash pad and put new carpet in it. These seats were out of a part out. I wanted a tilt column, but didn't want to have to buy a new one at the time, so I modified an S10 column. I also wanted the cruise control switches. There's a cruise control module in this. Oh, I also needed a shifter because the column that was in this was for a manual transmission. Knowing what I know now, I would not have bought this doubled in surround. It's 3D printed. I bought it off eBay. It was pretty expensive at the time for what it is. But I've owned a few cheap Chinese Android head units, and I've got a 10-inch in one of my trucks. It's got a ribbon cable on the face, so you can mount the face anywhere and not cut a hole in your dash. I would have just done that on this. And this one is a cheaper old one that came out of a part out. I haven't wired it up yet. There's no speakers in here. My gauges also don't work. I'd like to buy a gauge set sometime soon and wire up the stereo and put some speakers in here. So current plan is just get this back on the road, do a couple upgrades in the near future, but to do the whole rebuild, I need to finish my Jimmy and my Firebird first, and I've got a few others outside that need a little bit of work to be back on the street. So I'm going to work on tuning this today. If I get it running good, I'll probably make some videos of me driving it around.